wife informed me it was my turn to cook tonight.
Where you stopping on the way home?
Yeah.
Contact.
But every Sunday it's like at dinner time. To say, what do you have this week? Hey, I got this tomorrow night. Gotta go help these people pack their U-Haul. They're leaving Tuesday night. Wednesday night I'm open. Thursday night I'm open. Friday I'm always open because that's her night. So, Mayor, got any ideas of who's gonna? Does that appointment have to be approved by the council, or is it just his appointment?
I think for makes it under the council confirms.
Here's the man.
Upgrade.
Welcome, Sooners.
Yes, I.
Run. Good, and yourself? Good.
Center.
I think the only two that stay the same are me and
But probably rival some map libraries in my basement.
Switch things around.
Nothing more useless than GPS for people who don't know how it works.
So I heard Vera Lynn's one of our code enforcement officers now.
That's right.
Rocking and rolling.
I was talking to her son, Mark, because we work in the same building.
Yeah.
And he goes, hey, you know, my mom's got a new job in retirement. I said, no, what's she doing? She's a code enforcement officer. I said, well, next time you see her, could you tell her about this house?
I mentioned that at our meeting 2 times ago, and it's in the minutes.
All right, we got a form.
This is pretty high tech, but I still can't read them across the way. Except for right now when the print's.
That was the meeting last week.
It was good. Had some good conversation.
We could do a quick.
Yeah. Are you or Brett on staff reports going to talk about our joint meeting with the city council? With that?
Sorry?
There last week.
Oh, yes, at the council meeting. Yes. Useful, although, you know, I wish I'd had those maps that they were showing during that presentation, because number one, I can't see them over here. And it would have really been something I'd like to look at. sorry. I got an email, but I didn't get any enclosures or. Okay, my color printer doesn't work anyway, so I'll look
You could just missed it.
for it.
Yeah, I'd like to call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Cheney Planning Commission for Monday, October 9th, 2023 to order. Our first order of business is citizen participation. I don't see anyone in chambers and don't see anyone on our Zoom. Am I correct? All right, we will move on to approval of the minutes of September 2023, our regular meeting. Everybody had a chance to review those? Any corrections that need to be made to those?
Second,
Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the regular scheduled meeting for September 11th, 2023. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Moving on to item number 4, public meeting number 2023-09, community development block grant needs and potential projects. Well, Brett's keying that up. Thank you to everyone that was able to make last week's meeting with the city council. Brett's going to give us a little update on that, and we'll chime in later.
So as we do every year in October, we budget not has a pipeline for cycle. So some of you have seen this presentation when you turn before, some of you have not. City Cheney Community Development Block Grant process. So basically, something you need in, you receive about $2.4 million. $500,000 a year budget for membership. Back in timeline of projects is October. We'll have an application this month. Staff, January, February 2024. March, public security, public education, usually by April. They start doing how fast the federal government gets. So, a lot of moving parts here, a lot of different requires how fast. consortium, obviously it's okay, Kevin, all the appropriate areas, 11 small cities and towns, so very high. So we like, long-term state here. The city of Spokane Valley. City over 50,000 people can have their own community development program. The city of Spokane Valley is around 80,000 people. They do not. They have the option to either do their own or be part of the consortium. Okay, so Spokane has their own. So they're part of the consortium. But dollars on the state but also helps us cover more because we have more population of service. Catch 22. Basically, King County School District, special purpose, water district, the federal school, King County profits, non-profits, for-profit businesses, within school city. Eligible activities, public facilities, infrastructure, water, sewer, streets, can we use for public services? Youth programs, childcare center, programs, activities, economic development, dollars, housing rehabilitation. The housing rehabilitation distance program. Programs. Eligible activities for general government. General government operation. Political religious activities. Funds that are available. This is a guesstimate around basically county. It's kind of for obviously administrative dollars. There is a set aside. Spokane Valley. But track 270, 95, stop. We know it pretty well. We're wanting to track to ID. However, city of Spokane Valley has very strict when machine. Previously funded projects here in the city of Cheney, and then rebuilding water well, road, sidewalks, services for wine, cancer, and so that she can make that knowledge of this. Outreach centers, so over shelters, $1 year, dollars. priority needs. Consider, a water sewer structure. Development that's very others out there, this is why not just emergency, cell services. And we have had it, we do huge applications every year, we have to prioritize them, we support them. Always more applications, than dollars available. And so we look at who's making the application, they've applied in years past, what their success rate is actually completing the project. If they have matches, dollars. Several years I was actually on this board, so I actually went through and did the screening process. Way, opportunities, a whole host of others.
Fred? So this committee that reviews this, if someone in our community wants to apply, nonprofit or whatever, they send that to Spokane County, or they send that to us and then we send it in?
This application directly with the county. So the Department of Housing and Community Development Services, they receive all the applications. Sure that your rep and copies of all letters. Try to fully fund as many as we can. Or sometimes if there's a lot of things we'll do a partial funding, so everybody gets a little money. But if they're infrastructure projects, if the projects don't get fully funded, it doesn't happen at all. So do we fund a few of them, then when someone don't get any funding, or it could be partial? Have to kind of look at each application to see if we match, let's say it's an application for $200,000 and we fund 170, do they have a way of making it fit at 3,000? They do. Then we'll fund it. Always ask. So pretty basic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that, it's always had trying to get water main projects. Not very expensive, but two high priorities that we see road restoration. And are funded, but happy to report last year's funding that we received will be part of finishing up the like on third this week, bigger area. That's now it's kind of undersized and looking at it, maybe focusing on application. So see where we land on that project. Still working out. Cedar. We'll be taking a look at that harder. That is what.
Thank you. Any questions at all from any of the commissioners? Okay, moving on to item number. Jacqueline or Natasha, you guys have any input?
No, I don't. Thank you though.
Thank you. Okay.
I don't at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 5, Commissioner report. Mike McKeon Way, very nice, very smooth now. Really kind of like that. Okay. Miss Donner, you have a comment?
Yes, hi. I'm sorry, the sound is pretty terrible. I'm not sure if you already closed the public hearing about the community development block grant.
Well, we're gonna go back and let you be able to participate.
Okay, thank you. So I could share right now.
Sure.
Okay, well, it was, I do apologize. I don't know the audio is on my end or y'all, so it's hard to know here about kind of how the process works, but what I was hoping to share today was just wondering, and this may already be on your radar, but just thinking about some of the community needs that I wanted to highlight that folks may already be aware of. Wondering about expanding the hours for the Cheney Food Bank, or just providing more funding for the food bank in general to be able to provide more items to family. Childcare. I don't know if there are already agencies or organizations or nonprofits who are set up who could benefit. I know the application process is challenging, right? If there's not already someone who has everything else lined up minus the funding, that would be a challenge. But I wonder if there are providers in town who could expand their services or otherwise just have a better capacity to meet the needs of the community through this funding. Domestic violence services. We all know that domestic violence is, for at least the past 5 years, the top kind of case by a wide margin that the Cheney Police Department deals with, far and away above any other need. I think the next is like petty theft and malicious mischief, but just highlighting the need for domestic violence services for victims and survivors. And then at the Planning Commission and City Council workshop, there's a lot of talk about middle housing, but then some of the difficulties with the low profitability compared to other kinds of housing, and wondering if government funding is a good opportunity to think about how we could meet that need in a way where maybe in the private sector, there wouldn't necessarily, the market wouldn't fill that need because of low profitability. And then it sounds like in the past, Cheney Outreach Center has received funding to meet needs. I know there's a high unmet need for utility assistance, and I would imagine rental assistance to maintain folks in housing and prevent homelessness, and just in general, all the services that Cheney Outreach Center provides. I'm sure that they could benefit. So those are just a few things that I wanted to highlight that may have already been discussed. And again, I apologize if this is a total repeat or outside the process that I missed some of what was said earlier, but thanks for giving me the chance to speak.
You are most welcome. Thank you for the input. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 5. I also like 2nd Street. They're coming off of First 904. I think it's a great idea that we went to concrete versus asphalt, because that's been a recurring problem that we've had for years and years. So great.
Recurring problems, that one and you are probably.
I do. I'm very familiar with the North, the 6th and Cedar. But I usually don't go down Cedar. I usually go. So, and part of that is because I don't want to ruin my my vehicles. But anyway, any other reports from commissioners? Again, I want to thank everybody who was able to attend last week, Tuesday, with our joint meeting with the City Council. Great opportunity to voice our concerns. Had a lot of for those that weren't able to attend, there was a lot of people here present for the meeting. Naturally, because it was a work session, it was just a conversation between the planning commission and the city council. Not to, at that time, we didn't take any public comment, so and the meeting was led by our mayor. So any other reports from commissioners?
One thing, this is more of a concern than a report, but I'd like to hear some other reactions to what happened in Cheney during the wildfire that took our sister city to the door. My impression of what happened on that day is that we were not getting really the information that we needed over the media. I ended up doing most of my escape planning on my cell phone, and it should have been easier than that. The big concern that I have about that was that with so many exits from Cheney being closed because of the proximity of the fire, I have a little sketch here, but if you'll just imagine a right triangle of Cheney, we had fire to the north of the freeway at Medical Lake. We had fire to the west of us on the north side of the freeway. And there was a developing fire situation down at Tyler, all the way, in fact, from Soundlake all the way to Tyler. Now, 904 would have been a great escape route, except for one thing. It was jammed. And I just don't think that's sufficient. And if nothing else, it needs to be marked as an escape route. But the only way out of Cheney, if you think about it, without those things, would have been to go east, where you would hit 195, which was also closed. This worries me a great deal, because I was sitting there in my living room thinking, okay, I've thrown a few things in the car. Where the hell am I going to go now? And I hope some of you might have had that same experience, because I don't want to be the only one. But as a planning commission, you know, we're here to not only improve Cheney, but to keep it here instead of looking like Medical Lake. So I think we should have some input. Emergency services here as priority needs. That's not technically an emergency service, but at least it shows that we're planning ahead for what is bound to be a recurring event in the future. This situation isn't going to go away. We're going to have to live with it. And in order to live with it, we're going to have to plan a little bit better than we did this time for getting people out of Cheney safely and by the fastest method. So do any of the other commissioners, do y'all have any input on this? Did anybody have a similar experience?
I did with my parents. I was actually had tickets to go to the Coeur d'Alene Summer Theater that evening. And when I hit about, the Medical Lake exit, I heard on my car radio that the fire had jumped the freeway. And so I said, well, there goes $168. Turned around, came home, to my parents, loaded them up, pulled the car, backed the car in so they could get in more easily, and then just waited because it was, a level, at that time was a level 1, which I understand there was some confusion about who called that level 1, and there was never really a level 1. But we continued to just have my mom and dad, ready, but we kept doing the same thing, watching, okay, what's closed? How do we get them, out of town? And for me, it was fairly easy because my cousin who lives out at Williams Lake said, we've got 3 bedrooms out here, so if you need a place to go. So I was heading south, which there really wasn't an issue unless you got really further south, which I was not. So I was blessed to have family that said, we got plenty of room down here, and they said, you might as well come out now. And I said, well, my mother, she ain't leaving this house, until she absolutely have to, and we're probably gonna have to carry her out because she probably would rather stay in the house and burn up. But we were wondering the same thing. How do we get out? Because we had heard at one point that 195 was closed. So even if you get to 195, can you go north or south? Where do you go? So we were really concerned. And then we heard that the problem with Tyler, they were going to close Tyler. I understand they never did. But they were saying that was going to be closed, and it was interesting when I went to the store to just make sure I had some things that the traffic coming from the Cheney Spokane road, it was hard to get out of Yokes because of all the semis that were coming through town. But that was a little bit of challenge for my wife and I. It wouldn't have been a big deal. We would have packed up and gone to my cousins. It would have been a deal, but getting my mom and dad, that was a little scary, not knowing what would happen.
We had offers from friends in Coeur d'Alene and Spokane to, come shelter with them, but we couldn't get there. It was like, who would have guessed that you couldn't go to Coeur d'Alene, especially Spokane. So anyway, I just kind of throw this out for an item that we need to think about, because at some point, I think certainly by next summer, we need to have our ducks in a row as far as how we would evacuate Cheney if we ever had to. And right now, I don't see where anybody has even thought about that. Something could be distributed with the utility bill, some map showing designated exits from Cheney and all that. But I really had a few bad moments there trying to, because I never thought about this before. And I hate to admit this, but I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the threat of wildfire and urban areas. Okay. I didn't see it in Lahaina, and then a month later, I didn't see it right here. And those are both places that I've obviously spent a lot of time. So anyway, I just throw that out for your consideration, and perhaps we can start ginning something up. At least mention it to somebody who's responsible that we need to be ready for this next time, because it will happen again. One final thing I wanted to say is Marilyn Conrath is our contact for code enforcement. And one thing I've noticed as we get closer to winter now, and I start looking at these streets, thinking about what they're going to look like with snow berms on both sides, there are an awful lot of people parking trailers on the city streets, and that's illegal. And so I'm going to give Marilyn a call sometime and suggest that she look into that, because if we have to contend with snow berms and camping trailers and all, or RVs all at the same time, we're going to have an even bigger problem. So, thank you.
Jacqueline, I saw your hand up for a little bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on that conversation about preparedness for the fire. One, I had to reschedule my induction. I was supposed to be induced into labor that weekend, and that had to get postponed. And I had a plan for possibly giving birth in my bathroom, because there was no way I couldn't even leave my neighborhood. They shut down the roads in front of my house. So is there a way or something we can get scheduled maybe another joint workshop between planning commission, city council, and our first responders here in town to establish some kind of plan or published evacuation route, what we should do or how to better prepare for the inevitable. Because again, like it's going to happen again. The fire's getting closer to town every year. How can we better prepare? Because that really highlighted a chink in our armor, essentially.
My fear is that a train will be involved in all of this next time too. So we won't have any emergency services either.
All righty, thank you. Any other reports from the commissioners? Staff reports.
Yeah, just a couple quick things, to piggyback on. Graduation stuff. 24th is gonna be a confluence of the perfect storm, so to say, because we had the Gray Road fire, Oregon Road fire up in North Spokane County Office of Emergency Services doing the kind of in the sheriff's department kind of doing coordination. And if you went to social media, there's 50 billion different things flying around, maps, this and that. But one of the challenges I think came out of some of this stuff is because the area by the truck stop is part of 99004, which is Cheney's zip code. Sometimes that area was evacuated, even though Cheney proper may have not have been officially evacuated. I think there's some confusion there between areas. And I think that's going to be something I think as time goes on needs to be dealt with in terms of designating areas, because I think a lot of people, I live in Spokane, they're off here 195, 990, had the winds did not change direction and hit the truck stop area, hit Geiger. You know, I was in the I was on the fence this evening too, kind of checking my voicemail, had to go back packed, ready to see, okay, you know, is this gonna make a run for it or not? Luckily the winds did change direction for my sake, but then not for the sake of others. So it's but yeah, you are right. I mean, I think this is something that regionally, I think we should have some conversations with our first responders in terms of having a game plan, because usually if I-90 is closed, 904 is the alternative truck route. Back is closed, then you start really going out to the sticks for alternative routes. Cheney Spokane Road there is not really designed for 18-wheelers, heavy trucks, things like that for primary service, especially if 195 gets closed. So yeah, there are some. The county road network was never designed for that kind of traffic.
One of the interesting things that I observed many years ago when I first came to Eastern Washington on a field trip from Western Washington was that if you're driving around the Spokane area, virtually most of Eastern Washington, all the roads lead to Spokane in a radial pattern. It's like Rome on the Palouse. But given that fact, there are not many connecting roads to connect those radiating highways out of Spokane and Cheney. I mean, Cheney's along one of the main routes to the southwest, but like I say, you can't very well get from one radial highway to another radial highway unless you use your four-wheel drive and go through the wheat fields, which I was also thinking about. But anyway, just something to consider.
Oh, you make some good points on that. Other thing to report is everybody who did attend the Joint Planning Commission City Council workshop last week. A lot of good discussion, a lot of good discussion on urban growth boundary, and maybe some different ideas where we might grow in the future. Plan is to have hopefully another maybe get together in a meeting, maybe December, probably maybe early next year, probably in January. We'll kind of see how. As far as next meeting, I don't have anything on the docket for November. I think. do 5 volt. We'll be back until the 1st of November, way back that day. So, yeah, if we don't have a meeting in November, I'm curious.
What's the status of that development along Alwagden?
Just brushing, removing rocks and boulders, all that kind of slowing down. They are starting to get ahead of it. Right now, they have a section of Alwag Way blocked. They are working on the sewer water. Come up pretty fast. But I'm not too sure. I can extend concrete until.
I'm assuming that they didn't anticipate that much rock.
Neither did we when we did Central Park. We never anticipated the rock.
So our higher end houses just went up higher.
So, yeah, thanks for the workshop. I think we're trying to stay kind of finalize maybe. I think the main things to get out of that is that and that will pretty much set kind of the stage plan, but also that decision makers all folks to look at as we kind of put everything together, change the comprehensive plan, and we have this vision, or we have these things have to review or updating those in line with the comprehensive plan and our development standard. A lot of things in our development, all these can be achieved. Yeah, I can tell you that emergency access is how we get out of Cheney. One way, but when you take a look at the larger impact, we can't get out of Cheney because I-90 and certain areas during this time, it really should bring up kind of a scenario situation where that's out of Cheney. I was actually heading into the fire at late night trying to get in. My sister-in-law works in the state hospital, so she had shelter in place while the fire was near. But then when she was able to leave, her trying to get home, she had longer than me driving from Grease Lake in, because the reason why is I knew the road networks and so I lighted this angle and well, everybody said rather than change again. Oh yeah, you talk about emergency getting exercise. Take a look at see.
Yeah, I'll just address it real quick. I already had conversations with both chiefs, about the situation, what we learned, and a lot of times the decisions that are made, we don't necessarily, we feel the aftermath. Like the shutting down some of these roads that are directing everybody towards Cheney. That's sometimes out of our control. So what do we do now? And how do we protect our city? So one of our goals for 2024 is to update our emergency operations for the city. And that would include the evacuation piece that you had brought up. That was one of the first things that came to my mind was, oh, what if? What if? I mean, when 904 closed down, like that's our major exit or our exit. Then I thought, well, what about Cheney Spokane? Well, I got a call. One of our employees was stuck in the middle of traffic, on Cheney Spokane. Then I thought, well, now what? Now what? And so luckily both the chiefs were at the incident command center. We had, constant updates on, where they thought the fire was going, what the winds were looking like. And so, we felt comfortable, that it wasn't coming and going to directly, threaten the city. If that had changed, we were already starting to look at alternatives. Like Todd had talked about, Cheney Spangle is probably one of the best routes to get people out. Our issue was just like, Todd was saying, try to get back to the city. We had firefighters, we put the call out for everybody to respond because we wanted to make sure the city was protected as well as, contributing to the effort over in Medical Lake. One of our firefighters lives in the Reardon area. It took him about an hour and 15 minutes to actually get into Cheney, and he had to snake around. He finally got here. Scary thing for me, early on, before we knew that we were going to be safe, was, well, what happens if it does threaten, say, City Hall? We have a lot of city data, IT resources. What do? So at one point, our old IT provider told us, we'll just unplug all the servers and take them with you. Well, okay, I got my truck. I can throw them in. But then we contacted our new firm, Executech, and they said, no, don't do that. If Cheney gets to a level 2, we will send people out your way. Well, we thought, how are they going to get here with the roads blocked? And so we had actually Chief Jenkins ready to provide a, escort, for them to get them into town, along using the shoulder or however we could get them here. But that was an eye opener for me is, we have a lot of history. We have a lot of data that, we do have some of it stored, it's backed up over time, but we would have lost probably a couple of weeks worth of data. So that's caused us to also take a step back and say, hey, we need to make sure we're doing regular updates and so we protect the integrity of all of our data and our records and things. So we're going to take sort of a holistic approach at this emergency operations plan to just basically prepare for anything. Because I can tell you that these wildfires, they're going to get worse. I think we're going to be under more of a threat, and I think we all as utility providers need to be a little bit more proactive, about line clearance. Making sure that we keep things clear from the lines, because that's how a lot of these fires start. One tree gets into a line, in the winds are blowing, low humidity, high heat, it's a perfect storm. And so we're actually going to increase, our funding for line clearance, and we're looking at some other equipment and things to do all we can to protect at least our city, infrastructure. Electric. Trying to address, things as best we can, but this is really a region-wide effort, and I think it's a conversation with Spokane Regional, Department of Emergency Management, and really talking about a tabletop exercise. It needs to be, a region-wide thing where we look at all the, the things that could happen. They did one a few years ago on a train derailment, and especially one carrying something toxic. That was actually a really good exercise. A lot of things came out that I don't think folks have thought about before. Wildfire, I think that should probably be the next tabletop that's done. I think that's a lot of value, getting the right people in the room, talk about, how we manage the event and how we get people out of certain places or shelter in place and keep them safe. But, it's a discussion that has to happen.
Let me just mention that since you brought up the Cheney Spokane Road or Cheney Spangle Road, that road is very poorly marked. Now I go to the Harvester all the time and I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine a caravan of people from Cheney that don't know the secret turns on that highway and end up in Rosalia or God knows where. Yeah, that's something we have to consider too. If these things are gonna be emergency routes, they are gonna have to be signed so that people know where to take those trips.
And that's definitely a conversation to have at that county level.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Thank you, Mark.
Got it.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Could you hand that to Sue as you walk by?
Oh, yeah.